Happy Sunday, Tampa Bay. We're with you for another week to talk about the local real estate market. I have Richard Vasquez with Artisan Insurance and David Diaz with Waterstone Mortgage on today. And we're going to lead the show off today and get right into a good meaty topic talking about flood insurance. If you've seen the front page of the paper today, there's been a lot of chatter about changes coming to flood insurance. If you remember a few years ago, we had some big changes, and now it's on the horizon again. So we have Richard here to talk to us and give us the update about what's going on with flood insurance, what can we expect, and to kind of give you that update so that if you're in a flood zone, if you're not in a flood zone, if your insurance is going to go up or not, there's definitely a lot of changes coming through with this.
Yeah, good morning. How you doing? Right on the front page of the Tampa Bay Times, right under the picture of Tony Dungy accepting his
that's pretty awesome.
Hall of Fame, well deserved there. But we've been talking about this for a few years on this show. So if you're a long-time listener, you're probably sitting there going, "Here we go again." But a few years back, if you remember, the National Flood Service tried to just jack up the rates overnight and really hurt financially a lot of people.
And it hurt the real estate market. We saw a dip in luxury home sales. We saw a dip in waterfront sales, and specifically in low-lying areas, South Tampa, Pinellas County.
Right.
Those were some areas where that based on the elevation, flood insurance just was astronomically high.
Right. Yeah. There's a few places that are kind of known for that, but there was enough screaming and yelling, to cause them to think about it, to double think about it, and go back and say, you know what, maybe that's a bad idea, and to roll those prices back and hold them where they were. But they said at that time, this is only temporary. We're going to give it a couple years, and then we're going to slowly start raising rates. And here we are. This is what the article talks about on the front page of the newspaper. It's a couple of years later. And they said, basically, we told you this was coming. Now it's time, and we're going to start raising rates to basically get the flood insurance back to the unsubsidized rates. Because basically right now, the National Flood Service is subsidizing your flood insurance policy. What you're paying for flood insurance is not really what it costs for flood insurance. So their goal is to get those rates up to the unsubsidized rates so that what you're paying for flood insurance is what it really costs for flood insurance. And they're not going to do it overnight. If you live in your primary house, it's where you live every day, then you can expect a rate, depending on the area, between 9 and 20% increase each year until it gets up to that rate. Now, if it's a secondary house or a rental property, then you're going to expect to see a little bit more of an increase, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25% each year until it gets
So it sounds like, and again, obviously every situation is going to be different, but it sounds like the worst case scenario for people is 25% of an increase on what they're currently paying for flood insurance, whereas, that's for this each year. So this coming year it's going to go up 25%, and the next year it's going to go up 25%, whereas a regular homeowner, owner-occupant is looking at 10 or 20% roughly, so not as high. They get a little bit more of a subsidized rate.
Right, and this increase is going to continue each year until it reaches the non-subsidized rate, what it really costs for flood insurance for you to live in that area.
And what would you? I mean, obviously that's a several-year period.
Right.
It's not going to happen overnight, which is good. And again, it's not as if this is all going to happen at once. So people out there that are in one of these situations, your flood insurance isn't going to go up
Don't panic.
4,000% overnight. We're talking about
increases. Don't put your house on the market, even though if they do, that might help you.
Actually, go ahead. Call the Duncan Duo today at 855-970-WFLA. We would love to help you.
That's right.
Is there a rule of thumb for unsubsidized rates?
Not really. It depends on the
Elevation.
location. It depends on the elevation at that location. And, if you wanted to, we could go back and look at the whole history of how the National Flood Service came to be and how we got to this point. It would take probably most of the show. But
yeah, let's not do that. We might lose a lot of listeners. It might get really boring.
And it would be very boring to talk about insurance the whole time. But, I mean, basically, years ago, flood insurance was cheap. And so if you wanted to live on the beach, it cost you an extra and these are just rough figures, it cost you an extra $75 a year. And kind of like with something that we're dealing with today, they said, well, that's not what it really costs, but enough people are going to want to buy it So that way, all those people that want to buy it voluntarily will make up the difference.
Right.
And it never happened. Kind of sounds like Obamacare.
Right, right. And that
Exact
really
same
happened.
thing.
So then what you had was a situation where they had to not dramatically raise it. The government stepped in and started, paying a portion of it and subsidizing it in a way.
But yeah, and over the years, it's come up to about a $20 billion, somewhere in that neighborhood, $20 billion deficit. And finally, the federal government said, enough's
We
enough.
can't keep
We
eating
can't
this.
keep supporting this. We got to do something.
They can do a whole lot of other things, but they can't do that. I'm going to keep from getting political
That's
today.
all right. Let's not go
I'm
down
going to
that
avoid
path.
going down the political
Well,
path.
maybe a better question is: do you think it's done? Do you think the government will, intervene again, or is that?
I don't think so. I think the answer is in the private markets, and we're already seeing some private market flood insurance come in to help offer relief, and we're offering private market through a couple, and there are more down the road. Eventually, I think where it hopefully will head is if you want to buy a house in a flood zone, okay, here's your here's your homeowner's insurance policy, and for an extra X amount of dollars, we'll tack on flood.
Right.
And
So
and
insurance companies start adding it as an extra policy, kind of like, if you get car insurance, you add rental coverage.
Right,
rental
exactly.
car coverage.
Yeah, it's just an extra option.
One of the things that I think is kind of curious about, kind of going down, the flood insurance path, so to speak, is the concern that, interest rates. Right now interest rates are so low, so a little bump up in this is okay. But if we start to see flood insurance going up, interest rates going up, I mean, those are things, and prices going up. It's another reason why we continue to tell people sitting on the fence about buying a home, do it now.
It's not getting any cheaper.
Right.
I think what might be helpful to myself and to other people listening is, it's always hard for us as a lender to determine, what is the flood insurance going to be on a particular property. I know it varies on the elevation, but is there anything that, if somebody's looking for a beachfront property, it's going to be in this percentage, or if they're looking for an inland
so
property?
hard.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no rule of thumb, because let's take beachfront properties. You can have two houses side by side with dramatically different flood insurance rates.
Well, and elevations, yeah. I have a friend down in South Florida that is similarly runs a really large successful real estate team like us, and does a lot of waterfront stuff. And he'd actually at one point attempted to build a website where you could plug in an address and figure it out based on historical data from FEMA and the flood zone mapping on the county websites, to almost. You wanted to do it. The problem that he found out was it's so based on specific elevation, and there's no public data. You can't type in an address and find out, oh, that's 7 feet above water.
And the other problem is a lot of it's based on how the house is constructed.
Correct. Whether it's got something underneath it, whether it's concrete slab, whether it's built up, whether it's raised up on stilts. It's the elevation of that first floor.
We did a house for your team. I guess it's about a year ago. Beautiful house, right on the water, Pinellas County, luxury house. You did one of your videos on it.
Yeah.
And the flood insurance, because of the way this house was constructed, because it was elevated properly, because it was
really cheap.
It was $300.
It was on Wall Street, Reddington Beach.
Wall Street, yeah. It was $300 and something.
Yeah.
And other houses
right on the water, right on.
I mean, yeah. You wake up and there's
right next door. It could be $7,000 for flood insurance because they built it on slab, like right on the ground, instead of having the garage as the first floor. So
exactly.
It's really hard. He put a lot of time into it. He spent a lot of money developing it. My buddy was just like, "There's nothing. I
was kind of hoping you were going to say he was successful.
No, he was
I was
not.
going to ask for that.
No, he was not. He was unsuccessful and I think what he was doing was attempting to do some sort of algorithm based on the flood zone with the county, and then based on a location, and he was hoping to at least get a range, and even that failed because even like you said, it's the elevation of the first floor, not necessarily the elevation of the land. So when you get over on the water, a lot of those homes are built up, or they have the garage on the first floor, or uninsured space on the first floor, and
then you have owners that take that garage and turn it into a game room downstairs,
right,
and finish it all off nicely, and then they go to sell the house to somebody, and all of a sudden all the ratings change because now you have a finished first floor.
Right.
There's a million different.
And you can see why that's important. When you're going to get qualified for that house.
Oh, it's hugely important.
If you don't know whether the flood bill is going to be $7,000 or $300 for that particular home, you can see how that's going to affect your qualification. So a huge tip for somebody: if you see that home you're interested in is in a flood zone, go get your insurance quote right away. You know?
Correct.
Go get your insurance quote right away and ask the seller for the elevation certificate, because that is a big factor.
I remember, I mean, when we had the issues with, the flood insurance a few years ago, we were getting the elevation certificate as a requirement on every listing because
It's a good
everyone was
idea.
asking for it.
That's
Very
a, that's
we
a
kinda,
fantastic idea.
I could say we probably still ask for it, but I would say we don't require it now because it's just not as big of an issue. People aren't getting $7,000 flood bills on $200,000 homes.
Right.
So it's not as big of an issue, but it's certainly something to bring back and make as a requirement. The
the
seller should have it.
The front page in the Tampa Times, you're going to start getting it a lot more, and a lot more people asking about it.
It's a good point.